If you think about Mitch Richmond, there's usually two things that pop into your head. One being his days when he was with the Golden State Warriors and their multiple playoff runs that they had. But if you're like me and you're a Sacramento Kings fan, you probably remember how good he was during the 90s era. But his story, especially with the Sacramento Kings, is a lot crazier than what you think. But before Mitch would make his way into the NBA, he was a solid college prospect, averaging 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists during his time with Kansas City State, leading him to be selected 5th overall in the 1988 NBA draft by the Golden State Warriors. Mitch Richmond was an immediate impact for the team, averaging 22 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists, and taking home Rookie of the Year. Now, this team became one of the most fun Golden State Warriors teams we've seen in a long time, with them getting the nickname Run TMC because of the Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullin trio, not to mention their run and gun play style that was loved by so many Warriors fans out there. Like, if you're a Warriors fan or just an NBA fan in general back in those days, I'm sure you remember them. But even though the Warriors were selling out their games and Mitch Richmond was playing amazing, Warriors GM Don Nelson, he had other plans in mind. Forget all the run and gun play style, he wanted to have a better big man. And a better big man is what they got after trading Mitch Richmond to the Sacramento Kings for Billy Owens, who was just selected 3rd overall in the NBA draft. Now, this is where things get really interesting, not only for Mitch Richmond, but also for a lot of Kings fans out there. For someone like me who wasn't around during this time, I didn't get to witness this in real time, I had no clue that Mitch Richmond was actually dreading the fact that he had to go to Sacramento, with him saying that after he found out that he got traded to Sacramento, he couldn't stop crying. And by the time he landed in Sacramento, the first thing his teammates said when greeting him was "Welcome to hell." Now, to be honest, I really wouldn't want to be in a place either if that was what I get welcomed by. But Mitch Richmond went as far as to try to retire from the NBA just so he could become a free agent and sign with a different team. Now, thankfully for the NBA rules and his agent, who both kind of said that's not how this works, so Mitch Richmond was basically stuck in Sacramento. He was having such a hard time that he decided to not play in what would be his first game as a Sacramento King. Coincidentally enough, that game was against the Golden State Warriors. But instead of being on the bench with his new team, supporting and cheering them, he instead decided to drive around Oakland, remembering all the good times he had when he was a Golden State Warrior. Now, once the game was over, he called his wife because he wanted to know how the game went, right? Did the Kings maybe have this blowout win? Did they absolutely crush the Warriors? Is there actually some hope left for Mitch Richmond? No, because his wife told him that the Kings lost by 61 points that night. Now, this was obviously just a really rough time for Mitch Richmond. I mean, he was on the Warriors for 3 years, and 2 of those 3 years they made the playoffs. So going from that to a team that has 0 success is really hard. Not to mention, after their 61-point blowout loss against the Warriors, they didn't have practice for 2 days. After Mitch found out that they didn't have practice for 2 days after a terrible loss like that, he became unglued. But this attitude that he had, where he just wanted to work harder and make his team better, really paid off, because it only took 1 year after being in Sacramento where he made his first ever All-Star appearance, and he would continue to be an All-Star every year that he continued to play in Sacramento, with that being 7 years worth of All-Stars, a couple All-NBAs in there, and even winning an All-Star Game MVP. I mean, for me as a Kings fan, all I remember is that Mitch Richmond was an amazing player, and I just always kind of assumed that he loved Sacramento, and I'm sure that things changed over time and he started to enjoy it, because I mean, you can't be putting up this good of a performance and not like where you're playing. But even though Mitch was having all this success, the team wasn't, with them only making the playoffs 1 year during Mitch Richmond's run with the Kings, and that 1 year they got absolutely destroyed in the first round of the NBA playoffs against the Seattle Supersonics. Now, after 7 years, it seems like the Kings were kind of over it. They were kind of done with Mitch Richmond. They thought, all right, we probably got the most out of him, or they just kind of realized that he wasn't going to be the key player to lead their team to something bigger. So they go out and shop Mitch Richmond, and they end up trading both Mitch Richmond and Otis Thorpe for Kings legend Chris Webber. Now, this obviously became one of the best decisions the Kings have ever made. They got a super young, I'm pretty sure he was 25 at the time, Chris Webber, for like a 30-something-year-old Mitch Richmond and Otis Thorpe. It was a great deal. And Mitch Richmond also thought it was a great deal because after his first year in Washington, they gave him a 4-year, $40 million contract, making him the highest paid shooting guard in the league over players like Ray Allen, Kobe Bryant, and even Reggie Miller. But little did the Wizards know this was actually the end of Mitch Richmond's productive years. His productivity started falling off a cliff after he left Sacramento, leading the Wizards to buy out the last year of his contract just so that they can get him off their team. So Mitch Richmond, who was at one time a top-tier shooting guard in the league and was also the highest paid shooting guard just a year before, was now a free agent. Now, at the age of 36 and seeing that his productivity was down, a lot of people thought this would be the end of his career, right? No other team would really want to sign him, at least for anything crazy. That was until the LA Lakers came around and offered Mitch Richmond a 1-year deal to join their team. Now, this was obviously a different season for Mitch Richmond than any other previous year. He was more of a veteran role where he just sat on the bench and didn't play at all. He played a little bit in the beginning of the season, but overall in the entire season, he averaged 4 points. That should show you that he really didn't play much. Now, luckily for Mitch Richmond, the Lakers were insanely good, and they didn't really need anything from him. He didn't have to play. I'm sure he wasn't that loud of a voice when it came to the locker room because, I mean, you have Kobe and Shaq and Phil Jackson. Like, there's a lot of other voices that are going to be over yours, no matter how much of a veteran you are. But the Lakers were good enough that they cruised their way to the Western Conference Finals in what was the 2001-2002 NBA playoffs. Now, if you know anything, if you know the basics of NBA basketball, you would know that this series was known as the most rigged NBA series of all time, with that being the LA Lakers against the Sacramento Kings. Yes, Mitch Richmond rode the bench all the way to a Western Conference Finals against his old team that he played for in his prime. Now, as much as I'd like to get on here and say that Mitch Richmond played a game and he dropped like 30 points and crushed his old team and made it to a victory and won a championship, that's not really how it went. He sat on the bench the entire series until game 7, where he went in for 3 minutes, scored 1 free throw, got a rebound, and basically walked off the court and headed to an NBA Finals. Now, although this was a bittersweet moment for Mitch Richmond, having beat his old team and going on to win an NBA championship, which, I mean, we all know that the New Jersey Nets weren't going to win that year, so it was either the Lakers or the Kings winning that championship. It didn't take away any of the feelings that Mitch Richmond had for the Sacramento Kings, with him mentioning in his Hall of Fame speech that he played some of his best years in Sacramento and that he still actually lives there post-career. Not to mention, he said that the Kings have the best fans. I don't know if that's because he worked with the Kings at the time of his Hall of Fame speech. I don't know. I'm just saying. But Mitch Richmond was one of the best Sacramento Kings players of all time, left a lot of good memories in Golden State, didn't really do much for the Wizards or the Lakers, but he did end his career as a 1-time NBA champion, 6-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA, Rookie of the Year, and of course, a Hall of Famer. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to like and subscribe and click the video up on the screen. This is my first time doing a video kind of in this type of format, so let me know how you like it in the comments, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Later.